Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give everyone a few minutes to join.
Good afternoon. How are you all doing?
Good. How are you, Dr. Escobar?
Pretty good.
Just so everyone knows, the state doesn't allow AI meeting notes in our meeting, so I'm just removing them from our attendees list. Sorry for any inconvenience. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Annika.
Hi, Dr. Karki. Okay, it looks like folks are still trickling in, so we'll start in 1 more minute.
Welcome,
Hi, Dr.
Dr. Nancy.
Langston. Oh, hi, Dr. Karki.
Perfect.
Okay, we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to just kick things off with roll call before I turn it over to Nancy and Dr. Lansing, who I saw were both in attendance today. We have Dr. Escobar here, Anne-Marie Hart Bookbinder. We have Dr. Karki, Grace Leatherman. I see Steve McHenry. Hi, Steve. Oh, there's Grace. Joe Malone, I think, is here.
Hello.
Hi, Joe. And do we have Mark Powell or someone from MDA? Okay, well, excellent attendance, everyone. Way to go. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lansing and Nancy in 1 second, but just to give you an overview of what we'll be talking about today, we'll go over some brief announcements regarding upcoming meetings and just a quick check-in on the different processes that are happening at the committee and council level regarding voting for recommendations and nominating our next co-chairs. From there, we're going to give folks another opportunity to discuss the recommendations that are being considered within the Environment and Production Committee and ask any questions for clarification as you all consider whether you'd like to submit them to the full council for publication. And we will also be talking about the committee's priorities for the upcoming fiscal year and what you would like to do as a committee to help advance the recommendations you've put so much work into, and also what additional topics you would like to address. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Lansing and Nancy Nunn. And for those who I didn't call in for a role, if you could go ahead and put your name in the chat and your affiliation, that would be really helpful for us. Thank you. Dr. Lansing?
Welcome. So I just want to thank everybody for joining and all the hard work that's been done. It was really great to see at the full council meeting last week all of the great recommendations that are coming out of all the committees here and all the hard work that the subcommittees have done to make this happen. So I just want to thank everybody for their continued work, and looking forward to talking about the recommendations now and looking forward as well.
And I would just echo what Stephanie said.
Thank you, and thank you for being on this call. I know this is a rough couple of weeks with school ending and everything else that you have to do, so we appreciate it. So Annika, back to you. And can I just acknowledge, I think Summer's on the call. Thanks, Summer, for her work in shepherding us through the process while you were gone, and we really appreciate how she helped us and kept us on track. And welcome back.
Yes,
Yeah.
way to go, Summer. Thank you so much. And you've also reminded me, Nancy, that I neglected to introduce myself yet again. I am Annika Lefebvre, the Food Systems Resilience Coordinator with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. And I work as a support staff member for the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council. Okay, so the next Environment and Production Committee meeting is scheduled for July 10th. The agenda for that will be announced closer to the date. Distribution and access will also meet later this month on June 24th, and the next full council meeting is not going to take place until August 7th. So hopefully a more relaxed time for you all than this busy spring you've had. But with that, we'll get into our final committee review of the draft recommendations. There are 5 from the Environment and Production Committee. I was going to jump right into them, and what I'd like to do is turn it over to those who were involved in the drafting process to kind of provide an overview, as we did in the full council meeting last week, provide an overview of the recommendation and answer any questions that committee members might have. And so committee members, you should have all received copies of the full recommendations in your email earlier this week on Tuesday. Please let me know if you did not receive them, and we will make sure that you get them. Okay, and with that, Dr. Lansing, did you want to take the ag labor workforce recommendation?
I can start, but I see Joe's on here as well, and there's others that were involved, and so please feel free to chime in here. So what we went for on this one, really just to give a background of why we're thinking about ag labor, is this idea of there is a school internship program with MSDE on, doing ag labor through high schools, right? And kind of an apprenticeship program, but that's kind of in the schools and it stops after you graduate. There's also ag labor programs through the Department of Labor, apprenticeship programs that are a year-round program where the employer pays, but they get a tax break, they pay the hourly wage. But then there's also monthly and enhancement meetings for these apprentices. So they really kind of come in at a higher level. And often that's run by the Plumbers Association or other kind of trade groups that are there, but there isn't anything like this for agriculture. And so whenever we talk to especially small and medium scale ag labor is very much a problem. While we do have the programs for large farms where they provide housing and they have people come over through the visa programs, that's not really an opportunity for the small to medium farmers that don't have kind of on-site housing. And so the idea was to create a commission. The commission would address the unique challenges of workers and think about how we can incorporate workforce needs into existing CTE programs, explore other opportunities, thinking about apprenticeship programs, and develop actionable items to engage existing programs, stakeholder relationships to provide a stronger food system. So we actually have a couple people mentioned, including the Farm Bureau and others, on people that we think would be good to be on this commission. But it seemed that we had really good, fruitful conversations about what are the needs, but we didn't necessarily, in the time that we had, construct a clear path forward. So there still needs to be kind of people at the table and talking about exactly how we could develop a workforce program for ag laborers to provide, either year round or maybe even partnering with someone else so that it's, a harvesting and then, they have something else to do in the winter and trying to figure out how that type of program would work. So I'm happy to take any questions about this. Joe, anything else that you want to add?
I think you did a good job of covering it, Stephanie.
Yes, Steve, please go ahead.
Yeah, just FYI, the Maryland Agricultural Commission met yesterday, and this was a topic of conversation there at the commission meeting. I was hoping Martin would be on the call. He actually had some input on this, but I know the commission is also working on this topic and has a plan of action. I think that's complementary to this recommendation. And that's about all I know.
So, I mean, so is it a duplicative effort? Is the fact that the Ag Commission's already working on it means that we don't need this secondary commission, or is this still relevant recommendation?
I don't know. I'm not intimately involved in this discussion, so I don't know if having a separate commission would really elevate the topic or not. So I'm hesitant to say.
Yeah.
There wasn't any discussion about like this, what we're doing here would not work or,
Mhm.
in conflict. So maybe just leave it as it is until we're instructed otherwise.
No, but maybe making sure, Annika, we can look at the language, but is somebody from the Ag Commission specifically called out on the committee members? And so that's something we could do. I think what I see, at least from this, is the fact that we're looking at it again cross agencies. So it's not just the Ag Commission, it's Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, Department of Education. And we're really trying to do a cross agency discussion about this so that it can be kind of a cross-agency solution or something that is not just siloed. So maybe that's how ours might be a little bit different from the Ag Commission, but I'm not sure.
And I'm pinging Mark and Martin from MDA right now to see if they have any insight about what the Ag Commission is doing with the workforce development initiative that they have taken on. But I also listened into that call yesterday and wanted to highlight that several of these recommendations were highlighted by Martin and others during the Ag Commission meeting yesterday.
Yeah, and Martin worked on this recommendation, so it may be that they're kind of already starting this process of doing the commission and having that conversation. So I'm not sure.
Something that I wanted to highlight too was that the Department of Labor was really consulted during the recommendation development process for this one. And it seemed like they had a lot of positive things to say about this suggestion and were really on board with what was being proposed here. Any other questions for Dr. Lansing or this work group?
So I would say the next steps, just one, we would vote on this and to be codified, just to be clear on what, so the idea is this recommendation will be voted on when, Annika? I think soon.
Yeah, so the recommendations will be voted on by June 24th at the committee level. It's a little confusing for first timers. From there, all of the recommendations that are approved at the committee level will be reviewed and receive feedback from the full council. So folks who are not on this committee can still weigh in on the wording of the recommendation. And there will be a final vote in July about the publication for the report. Dr. Escobar?
Yes, Rick, I can see the recommendations and the attachment that you have, but I cannot open them in my browser for some reason.
Did anyone else have that problem? Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Was anyone able to open them?
Maybe
Yeah,
just,
I did.
yeah, go ahead.
I did open.
Okay. So, Dr. Escobar, I'll follow up with you with a different email to see if we can work it out.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
So just kind of as moving on from this one and as we go to the next one. So in terms of the ideas is getting this passed so that's codified into from the subcommittee level and then at the fuller council this summer when our report comes out. And then working, to me, it sounds like then the next steps would be working with the Ag Commission deliberately to say, is this a new commission? Is this a commission that's part of the Ag Commission? Where does it sit? It may be something that we could do this without it being an actual legislative effort. And so that's part of, just part of these efforts there are things that we put out there as far as a food council that we need legislation and we need a budget and we need something to enact. There's also things where a state agency or a commission can just say, that's a really good idea. Let's just run with this. And so to me, this sounds like a recommendation that if we codify it and kind of explain our vision for having all these people at the table, that maybe the Ag Commission could run with this, right? Without it needing to be a legislation, and something where we can kind of explain our vision and our process to the Ag Commission and see if that's something that it needs its own standalone commission, or it may be something that can be brought within the Ag Commission, which are both perfectly fine outcomes for this type of recommendation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lansing. This next one was out of the group that was working on climate smart agriculture. This was the early warning weather system to alert farmers, and really focused on MDEM's new Mesonet system. Did anyone work on this recommendation that would like to share more?
So Dr. Karki was on the work group for this particular recommendation. I was on the work group. The Mesonet system's a pretty advanced weather system that is operated between the University of Maryland and MDEM. And it's really to provide more localized weather data and timely weather data throughout the state. They've increased the system within the last year by providing more sites. But the thought was that we constantly hear as farmers are preparing, and especially, there you go. And especially as the weather changes and intensifies, they're looking more local level data that can help them plan and also help them prepare or adapt to an emergency there. So that's what this particular recommendation is about. I know there has been some conversation about where it would live, and I think it's MDEM and the Office of the State Climatologist. And it's really, there would not be, well, there may be an increase in funding, but it's also, funding is already in place for the Mesonet system. So if there's any questions. And thank you, Annika, for saying it was discussed at the Ag Commission. I don't know if you want to share or Steve wants to share if there were any questions or concerns.
Well, Martin
Well,
has now joined us. Maybe Martin.
Martin is here.
Yeah.
Hello.
I'm sorry, Martin, you always jump in and get thrown right to the conversation. We were just talking about the Mesonet system, the fact that it was brought up at the Ag Commission yesterday, and whether you wanted to share anything about that.
Sure. So, and I can put my face on camera. I'm somewhere here. Sorry, I got hung up on a controlled environment agriculture meeting. So very, very timely. Yes. So the Mesonet conversation sort of initiated about a month ago. Obviously, everyone's familiar with some of the ongoing efforts and Harry Hughes, et cetera. But MDA met the state climatologist on the UMD campus and discussed the Mesonet and potential to engage with the agricultural community for specific projects. We know that funding, of course, is a tough ask this time around, but that we wanted to start being strategic and engaging with the communities that could very well leverage these tools. So the state climatologist presented on the Mesonet, and more so presented an ask to the Ag Commission about how they can better serve the community by tailoring information. And I believe the Ag Commission was more or less asked to provide that kind of feedback. There was some immediate feedback along the lines of accessibility, which frankly aligns with the recommendation for this weather system, which was brought up and shared with the Ag Commission just because it was a timely ask. But the Ag Commission in a work group is going to, compile a list of needs and the type of information that is most valuable to who they represent and share it with the state climatologist in a follow-up. All in all, I think it was a very engaging conversation. It's information that exists. It's just a matter of appropriately leveraging it in unique ways to better serve the industry. Is that an okay summary, Nancy?
That's great. And thank you. And I learned a lot from that summary. So thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Martin and Nancy. Any questions on this one?
To follow up a little bit, it sounds like we all should have been at the Ag Commission meeting yesterday, but to follow up a little bit, Martin, was the request at the meeting, so this request is actually asking for funding, correct? There is a funding. What is the budget of this request that we're looking at right here, I guess is my question.
We did not put a budget on it because we were waiting in a way to hear back from the climatologist and MDEM to see what the current funding was. Now, based on what Martin just said, I don't know if we would be, it's sort of like we had thought if they can just provide funding, continue to provide funding. But based on what Martin has said, there may be a need for increased funding depending on what needs are identified through the commission's work. Is that correct, Martin?
Well, I would say that this was absolutely a creative conversation to see what other potential opportunities exist external to the existing framework specific to the mesonet development. It was to get the Ag Commission familiar with the efforts. Although some of the information can absolutely be provided within the scope, when conversations got brought up along the lines of the push notifications and potentially a farmer app, obviously we know we are looking at additional resources.
One
Summer?
quick thing, just jumping in, and apologies because I was not in yesterday's meeting. Annika got me up to speed on some of it, so I might just be might not have all the context. So apologies if this is a dumb comment, but Mesonet will be creating push notifications. So if that did not come across, that is within scope for Mesonet. Definitely a point well taken on the farmer specific app and things like that. And always happy to make the connection to the team within MDEM that's working on Mesonet if we can do anything to connect the dots even more with some of the feedback that came up yesterday or that comes up in the future. But yeah, I think we can see if there's a need for a funding request associated with this, or if we think it's a situation where maybe in this next year we wouldn't get funding, just thinking about how to kind of get involved in the Mesonet work to ensure that some of the needs of farmers are being incorporated in it as they're developing this out.
Yeah, and sorry if I'm confusing everyone. The update in of itself, obviously, the conversation went beyond this recommendation that's on the slide. So if we're taking a step back and asking about the funding as it relates to this recommendation as worded, no, I don't think you're looking at additional funding beyond the way that this has been crafted and proposed. Obviously, the farm community got excited about the concept, and the Ag Commission obviously had some ideas surrounding it. But the push notification concept and the information shared yesterday was very well received. Based on what's on screen, I don't think that there's any new developments as far as wording or content.
But it seems that we're aligned with exactly what's needed is what I'm hearing, and that there's already efforts to continue this conversation beyond this recommendation. Yeah, perfect. Wonderful.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Here's our other climate smart agriculture recommendation. This is a collaborative approach to resource sharing recommendation. Nancy, and I think Dr. Karki, did you work on this one as well? This is the one-stop shop recommendation.
Miss Nan is the lead here also. I just chipped in somewhere in between here and there, but she's the one who always does fantastic job.
So this is a request that we've heard throughout the state. Dr. Karki's heard it with his research projects and the work that he does with farmers. There were several farmers in the work group and they suggested this. We at the Hughes Center has heard it. A one-stop shop, it's, as we all know, you can spend hours and go down those rabbit holes looking for information related to climate practices, and climate practices aren't always identified as climate practices. So the thought here was to streamline the research that a farmer or anyone would have to do, technical service provider, to find the links to relevant research, relevant data, relevant agencies, relevant funding sources, for farmers to address issues that they're seeing related to climate change or climate adaptation. And there likely would be a funding request with this one. Originally, the work group had identified MDA as the potential location of this, and MDA in their remarks said that they thought it would probably be better at the state climatologist again. So, and I'm not trying to put words in the agency. I mean, I think we're just trying to figure out who has the resources, where it makes the most sense. So Martin, I don't know if this one came up or there was a conversation about anything of this nature. There are examples elsewhere in other states, but also regarding other resources in Maryland that have similar one-stop shops. So did this come up at the commission yesterday at all?
Again, it was sort of folded into the Messinet and just the resources available to them. These recommendations didn't really get brought up to the Ag Commission beyond a quick kind of glimpse over, just mentioning kind of what the focal points were. So we didn't dive into it too deep. But again, from MDA's perspective, you know, without the fiscal impact disclaimer, we certainly feel better suited as a supporting agency than a housing agency. It's a lot of information that isn't necessarily centralized to MDA. And so when it comes to having to aggregate and hold that, it seems like the state climatologist might be the better house for it.
Thank you. Are there any
And-
questions? Go.
Sorry, but MDA is not highlighted in this recommendation as the owner of the one-stop shop. Is that correct?
Originally, when we talked about it, we were trying to figure out what state agency should own it. And we originally did highlight or suggest
It says
MDA.
MDA is a possible site for the resource.
And then MDA came back and suggested the state climatologist, which, as Martin explained, probably is the logical choice. So, you know, we could probably say the same thing. It's suggested the state climatologist, but where the state will put it, you never know.
So would that be something you would want to add to the recommendation or just leave it as just not specific?
So I think we could add it to it. Or, you know, we could say remove MDA, put in the state climatologist. I hate not to put any agency suggested, because then who knows where it would end up. It could end up with an agency that really has nothing to do with it. So maybe the state climatologist, to put that one in as suggested.
So
sh-
what I was going to say is the committee, if you do decide to submit this to the full council report, the next step would be that revision process, and that would be the prime time to make any alterations like the one that's being discussed right now, where MDA wouldn't be named as the administrator of this recommendation. It would
Okay.
be,
Okay, so just so I'm clear, because I all of the stuff. So the recommendations as they're written right now is what we're voting on as a committee this week. We are not making changes. We've just vote on them as written because that's what the state agency saw, for example. And then you guys will send all the recommendations out, ask for our revisions where we do that line by line Excel sheet with the revision. So your suggestion is at that time we do this suggested revision, and then that would be taken up when does the full council vote in this? I'm sorry,
yes. So right now the committee is just being asked to say yes or no to each of the recommendations, and then from there will be another editing process that's open to every council member, not just at the committee level. At the end of that revision process, you'll all receive a final draft, and you'll vote yes or no on the final draft and inclusion of the final draft of each recommendation as it's been updated by everybody, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Can I just ask a question? And this is more a procedural question. I'm not trying to argue it, but now that we're in the midst of this, it makes me think, and I know the agencies usually abstain. I guess my question is, if it's a matter of the agency that everyone, it sounds like collectively on this call, agrees it could be changed to, I would hate to see, and I'm not just saying this particular recommendation, I would hate to see a proposed recommendation, if everyone agreed with the concept, get killed at this stage because they don't agree with the agency being named or whatever. Do you see what I'm saying? And maybe that was, I guess, my error. It should have been, how do we work through that? And Steve, I know, is going to have the logical.
Well, I don't know if I have the answer to that specific question, but I do have a question. It seems to me there may be more to this recommendation that we're not actually seeing on the screen, because you mentioned that MDA was the targeted agency here. We're not reading that. And it sounds like we can't amend that today for kind of like the obvious substitution of the agency. And so, is there another document that I should be looking for?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so Steve, you all received copies of the full recommendations as written that you'll be voting on Tuesday morning. It would have come from the MDFSRC email address.
Okay, I'll look for that.
And
Thanks.
if you didn't get it, I can send it out to you again.
so I guess what I'm hearing is the fact that that document already went out and we're having this meeting now is one of the reasons why we can't change it. But I guess my question is, it sounds like the state response was MDA said, no, let's have somebody else lead it. And so it wasn't changed at that time.
I
Should
guess-
it have
I
been
guess-
changed at that time when they said, let's it not be us?
So we asked the ad hoc work groups to make the changes that they felt were appropriate based on the state agency feedback. And so if it didn't get changed, that's why it just was probably overlooked. But it's not too late to make small changes. And I think the small wording things should not deter someone from voting yes or no if they strongly agree with a concept, because there will be this additional feedback opportunity for all council members later on. I don't think that the wording says that it must be housed within MDA. It just highlights MDA as a possible source for the one-stop shop. Summer, you had your hand raised.
Yes. And I think you just put it really well, Annika. Yeah, I think these are like good conversations to have. And I totally agree. Like, after the yes, no vote happens, there can still be opportunities to make tweaks, especially if it helps like strengthen something or make it more actionable. And I think, there might just be a reality where, especially given resource constraints, it might be a situation where we don't have a lot of agencies kind of raising their hands to take on new efforts. And I say that like understanding that perspective, like really, really clearly just from our position as well. So I think even if it's, a good idea that we think deserves to be in the report and we, don't know who would own it, and it maybe would take a little time beyond report publication to try and figure that out. I still think it's really helpful to get the idea out there.
Any other thoughts on this one? Thank you, Summer. Before we move to the next. Okay. Statewide guidance for,
I'm sorry,
go ahead.
I just opened it right now, so I'm trying to get the exact language just to kind of tie this up before the exact language is the Maryland Department of Agriculture is a possible site for this resource. So that's the exact word, as farmers look to MDA for information to address their concerns. But the creation and maintenance of the one-stop shop would require staff and funding. Hopefully,
Just to be clear, we can't amend that today.
well, it already went out to be voted on. I mean, it's the email went out. Yes, the email went out on 2 days ago on June 10th at 8 in the morning. And so that email went out with the attachment as a PDF. And so that is the words in the PDF that the committee is supposed to vote on by June 24th. So I think it's just a procedural thing of when this meeting fell, right? And so it sounds to me like we all agree as a committee that in the revision stage, this should be revised and that language should be taken out. But because it's already gone out for vote, I don't think you can do that because people may have already voted. Is that, at least that's how I'm my understanding of the procedures.
And this has gone to the whole commission or just the committee?
No, this has just gone to voting members, the people whose names were called at the start of the meeting. So this is still at the committee level.
On this committee, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So here, if I can share for just 2 seconds. So just so that people are aware. So this is the email that you should have gotten. And it just went to these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 members who are the voting members from the full council on the thing. And then it had these attachments. So Steve, if you haven't seen
I found it.
your email, yeah, you're here. And so the action required. So if you're a voting member, please look for this action required and complete the voting form by Tuesday, please. So that's what everybody should have received if you're a voting member. If you're not a voting member, there isn't an action. Again, the idea is that, we want everybody to participate, but only the voting members can do the vote, but everybody can participate in these committees and the subcommittee meetings.
Did the non-committee members also receive this information somehow?
No, only the committee members. So we reviewed in the full council, the slides that we're seeing right now, just like the broad overviews last Thursday. So we've gone over with the full council, the general idea for each recommendation. The committees are the only ones who are seeing the draft of the full recommendation at this time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we have, representatives of the Agriculture Committee in the call today, Future Harvest, Farm Bureau, et cetera. Like, I'm wondering how they're following along.
Well, Future Harvest, is Grace
Oh,
Leatherman.
Grace is a
She's
member.
on this.
Okay, yeah.
She's on this committee and she received the recommendation as such. Yeah.
And Annika, real quick, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it will go to the full council for comments and feedback. So I think this is what Dr. Lansing was saying too. This is like a procedural thing of like when we will be able to reflect this feedback, but know that we have definitely made a note of it and there are opportunities to take feedback in the future from the entire council. I know it's a confusing process because I think I've stumbled over my words on it for the last couple months, but yeah, so that this is definitely not the only opportunity, and it will go to the full council. and all
I
that.
guess what I was asking, we have other participants from the public who are in the meeting, like they're flying blind, except for what they can read on the screen.
Yeah.
That was my comment.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that's fair.
Right. And that's intentional because you have not officially voted to submit it as your committee's recommendation yet. And so it's not for broader sharing with the public right now.
Oh, okay.
I think we shared the Google Docs that this came from with the committee, like before last meeting. So, but it's, yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry that I realize that it's a confusing process and it takes a few cycles to get used to it probably. Okay, for the sake of time, we're moving forward. Is that okay?
Yes, it is perfectly fine. But just wait, one last thing is, so the Farm Bureau and Commerce, they're on, Commerce is already in the email. So just the Farm Bureau, they're on the council, but not official on environment and production, but they could make themselves official if they wanted to.
That's correct. So Carl Schlegel is the representative from the Maryland Farm Bureau who is on the council, and he has not elected to be on this committee. But every council member has been made aware that they can volunteer to be on any committee they wish to be.
Thank you.
What about another Farm Bureau representative? We have the Director of Government Relations on the call here with us today, Tyler Huff. Like, is there a way for him to be engaged?
He can participate in this conversation right now if he wants to.
Okay. He just hasn't had an opportunity to see all the background material then. Is that the
He
issue?
could also encourage his appointed member to ask to be a voting member of this council if they wanted to.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, local food procurement. This was a recommendation that the Department of General Services should create a guidance document for state agencies on how to increase the procurement of Maryland grown food and Maryland produced food. So Joe, did you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I can kick it off. It sounds like you gave a good overview, but yeah, the recommendation proposes the creation of a state-specific guidance document that outlines the procedures for participation from both institutions on the buyer side, but also local Maryland producers as well. And yeah, with the goal of increasing participation in local food procurement. And so when it comes to implementation, the Department of General Services was selected as the lead agency with support from the Maryland Department of Agriculture and also the Maryland Department of MSDE, excuse me.
And so there was a pretty robust conversation about this during the council meeting last week. Delegate Charkoudian was highlighting that this guidance document would be providing clarity and emphasis on existing legislation that requires state agencies to produce to purchase a certain percentage of their needed goods from Maryland certified farms and fisheries. Any other questions or comments on this recommendation?
Yeah, I'll just add that, yeah, this was a long discussion in the full council meeting. So I think this is something that's definitely necessary. And it's, we'll see if it becomes a legislation. But it's basically mandating the Department of General Services to produce this documentation to help agencies know what to do to get to where they need to be. But a lot of the conversation was based on Delegate Charkoudian was pointing out that the fact that this is coming from the general services telling the state agencies what to do, but really the state agencies need, so the University of Maryland, the hospital, the prison, or the individual entities under the state need to be the ones that when they're doing their contracts that they have for 2 to 3 years or whatever they are, that they put in there that this language from the legislation needs to be in their contracts. And they're the only ones that really control that. And so I think she had like a different spin on it, and I may not be saying her words correctly, but That was a lot of the conversation that was happening at the full council meeting.
Thanks, Dr. Lansing. Any other thoughts on this one before we move to the last? Okay. The last one, establish scalable and specific standards for farm processing and production of value-added agriculture. And so this is something that I think Martin was kind of spearheading, and Martin is back on the call. But also, I know that MDA has been doing work within their agency to try to address this recommendation as well. Martin, did you want to say anything about this recommendation?
I think that this recommendation reflects some very similar recommendations in the past, revolving around, sometimes it was in the parking lot and not a formal recommendation, but revolving around the complexities of getting established in agriculture and contributing to the food system. So through our efforts with engaging with our state partners on a number of cases, as well as the statewide guidance document initiatives, many of you may be familiar with, the work group that consisted of a number of farmers, agricultural development specialists, and even some local health officers, sort of brought up the need for some self-evaluation within some of these regulatory entities. So the way that this recommendation was worded was really to sort of give a directive to two really relevant regulatory agencies in both MDH and MDE to take a look at internal processes, because I feel like through our engagement with them, they often feel like they are being told how to regulate something. Well, obviously, the best perspective for how something should be regulated and what is and is not working would come from those regulating it. So, very simple, very broad. We had a little back and forth, I believe, with state partners as far as what this recommendation was really getting at and whether or not it was going to require additional fiscal impact. This ask is not created in a way to establish a fiscal impact or any kind of burden. The ask is simply that the agencies that regulate and license agriculture take an internal look on some of those processes and licenses and procedures to do sort of an internal assessment on what is, what isn't working, so they can contribute to the creative solutions and lowering some of these hurdles and easing some of this burden within the regulatory framework for producers and value-added businesses.
Thanks so much, Martin. Any questions for Martin on this one or the others who worked on this recommendation? Okay, hearing none. Thank you for reviewing that. Please feel free to reach out if you have any trouble opening that email I sent you with the full recommendations. Or if you need me to send it again or have any questions about the voting process, please let me know. Here's a reminder of the timeline. So it has been pushed back a couple of weeks already. The deadline for you to vote just yes or no to submit it to the full council is June 24th. We are going to send a full report draft back to the entire council on July 8th. And during the month of July, every council member will have the opportunity to submit additional feedback and corrections or word changes to MDEM. The final draft of the report and voting forms will be out to you by the end of July, with a deadline to vote for publication in August. So any questions on the process before we jump to the next topic? I know that it's confusing, so please feel free to reach out. Okay, so we wanted to take a moment to talk about next steps for the committee. Something to keep in mind is that nominations for the next co-chair for each of the committees and for the full council are due by the end of the day tomorrow. Thank you to everyone who's already nominated your fellow members for the position. We'll be announcing the next steps shortly. But as part of looking ahead at the coming year. We just wanted to kind of set the stage now and see what priorities you feel that the Environment and Production Committee should be pursuing in fiscal year 26. So I'd like to open it up to you all, and Dr. Lansing, if you have any initial thoughts on any issues or action items you feel like the committee should be looking to address.
I see this as being two-pronged. So one of it is, maybe thinking about the recommendations that, we're putting forward right now, and how we can kind of keep the conversations going. So we already talked about a lot of these happening in the Ag Commission already. Working with the state agencies, the climatologists, the Department of Labor, all the, the Department of General Services, all of these. So I think part of it is continuing the conversations. And so thinking about, is there somebody that we want to bring in from any of these agencies that have been mentioned today to, talk a little bit more about the current recommendations, and also thinking about if there's other things that we should be thinking about or being aware of in terms of this realm of food resiliency. And then I think that's one prong. And then the second prong is thinking about, regardless of the recommendations that we've just done, what are the new things that we really want to be working on that weren't ready for recommendations this year? And so we're kind of in this strange holding period for June and July, and that the recommendations are not out. They come out in August. So we can kind of pivot to some other things, but we're also in the space too, where we can kind of continue working on some of these, but just as kind of conversation. And but we don't have official recommendations to go out there and kind of publicize. So that's kind of where we are.
So along those lines, Stephanie, I think another thing is, like, I found out a lot in today's meeting about input or reaction to our recommendations that occurred at the Ag Commission. So I think, one thing maybe as a council or committee we do is, who should we be interacting more with, and really getting, I guess, interaction with the Ag Commission or other groups, so that we can collectively work to move some things forward, and also make sure that we're collaborating and really helping Ag and the food system in the best way possible in Annapolis or elsewhere at the agencies, providing the agencies support. And I think that would help also with the council's visibility and visibility for our recommendations as they move forward. And, I would say to Martin or anyone else from the agencies, Steve, help us do that. How do we do that? Because I learned so much through the work group and the process from not only the people on the council, but outside of the council that have joined these conversations. And I think it's really important to keep that interaction going.
I'm just briefly add that my perspective is a little unique in that I really only participate in the E&P, and there's a separate MDA staffer for voting on the full council. But engaging with the work groups, obviously a lot of good feedback, but I think we need to be strategic. And when we summon and request voluntary input and engagement, it's quite a hierarchy going from a full council to committees to subcommittees to working groups. And there was a comment earlier about the Farm Bureau appointee. Not only are they representing Farm Bureau, they're a full-time farmer. So we need to pick and choose when we're asking for their buy-in. It's giving them some of these resources and keeping them abreast of the conversation is definitely helpful. But you know, I think the roundtables are helpful, Nancy. We had a nice, engaging conversation, but we kind of have to pick and choose and do that a bit more strategically. I do think through this engagement and even through, I'm recognizing a lot of complementary efforts, not repeated efforts, but complementary efforts. And I think that's been a really good way for the FSRC to begin to engage with some of these other vessels, such as the Maryland Ag Commission. The questions got brought up about the app and the push notifications before I even got to update them and excite them on the FSRC proposed recommendation. Our statewide guidance initiative now very well complementing FSRC's ask of internal agency review. I think as long as we kind of stay lockstep and play our potential roles, that's how we're going to continue to get engagement and expand our network a little bit. But I'd be lying if I said I haven't gotten some feedback about, you know, the intensity from some of our external players about what's being asked of them. So, you know, I think sort of just strategizing when we need them, when we need that input, I think they'd be more than happy to. But when the emails get inundated or the calendar gets inundated, we've officially entered full swing season too. So it's really hard to get the farmers at the table.
I appreciate that. Point well taken.
Can I dovetail on that? And
Sure.
ask a question. Yeah, I agree 100%. And it really is I mean, there is really a tremendous amount of work involved with being a member of the council in terms of the amount of emails we get. You know, the expectation members would serve on at least one committee. It can be very time consuming. I just have a question. Can a full council member appoint an alternate to either represent them on the full council, or can an alternate be designated for a committee assignment?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what NDA has done. So Martin, I believe, you know, Martin's kind of the representative on the EMP, and then we've got Rachel or somebody else or Mark that may be the full. And so I think that's encouraged. So, you know,
So
you
could Farm Bureau designate Carl to be the full council member and Tyler to be, for an example, a member of this committee?
Yes, Carl would have to explicitly say that he wanted to have a designee,
Okay.
and he would have to elect to be on this committee in the first place.
So Carl would have to elect to be on the committee, and then he would designate the alternate to represent him on the committee. Be clear.
Right, but we can't tell them that they have to do it. It's the committee process is completely voluntary. The council membership only requires members to participate in the bi-monthly meetings. That's it.
Right. So the ball's in Carl's court, but he could
Right.
elect
Yes.
to designate somebody to serve on a committee.
Yes.
Okay.
Poor Martin's been volunteered for everything.
Well, if I have a vote, it's news to me, but no, happy to engage as always.
So Tyler's listening to this. I know we're texting back and forth. So
well, specifically, so we do have, you know, as we're hearing the last couple minutes, is there anything that people would like to have specifically as a topic for June 24th?
You mean for the July meeting, Dr. Lansing?
We're already in June, July 20
July
something,
meeting.
July, whatever. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm brain fried here. So the next meeting is, July 10th.
is that full council or committee?
Committee.
North
We're
Environmental
just talking about the
Committee.
committee. This is
Yeah,
environment
the full
and production
council
only.
doesn't meet till August.
Does the committee want to continue to meet through the summer months? What would you like to talk about? Do you need a summer break? We're looking for feedback here.
Yeah, I mean, my thought is that we are at kind of this crossroads. We can't really advertise we're kind of at this holding point because we can't really advertise the recommendations that we already have because they're not voted on until August. And then we can't really, you know, I guess we could move on if somebody has something that they would like to move on about. But I do feel like this July meeting is a little bit in the middle of unknowns.
Could I make a suggestion that we keep the date?
Mhm.
That if something and I don't even want to say earth shattering because the day changes so much anymore, happens that impacts ag or is impacting the state,
Yep.
that we could discuss that. But people always love to have a meeting canceled from their calendar.
Yeah, I like that. Keep it there for now, and it can turn into maybe a community conversation, right? And so if there is the need for that. Yeah, Leslie.
Hi, and I guess as a follow-up to that, do we want to discuss what's happening federally and the implications for resiliency in the state?
Yeah. I mean, especially with SNAP and you know, so many things happening and how that's going to affect how we think about not only the state budget, but the federal cuts. We're getting slammed on both sides.
Right.
So Annika, I know we're done at 2, but I think what Leslie just said begs a bigger question of the whole council. You know, is there time or do we need space to have that sort of conversation and not wait till the next structured meeting? Or I think that's something that really needs to be determined and discussed as a council.
So I'm reluctant to tell the council members that they have to attend an additional meeting just based on what Steve has said moments ago about there are too many meetings and emails going out. It is something that we talked about having as a priority for the August meeting for the full council, but committees can choose to have this conversation as well if they want to. But I'm here to support you also. If you want to have another full council meeting and that's a popular thing, it's not off the table.
You could make it non-mandatory. Like it, I mean, I think there's opportunities to have conversations like that don't have to be a structured, you have to attend, whatever, but it might be a space. And maybe it's, you know, and I don't know how the agencies feel about that, if they're comfortable with that. Maybe it's somebody comes forward and says, I'll have that conversation. You know, anybody that wants to come can come. I'm just throwing it out there.
So was the recommendation to use the time on July 10th as an update on what's going on with federal budgeting? Is that what you were suggesting? Relative to ag and SNAP?
I guess that's what I am suggesting, and if not in July, at some subsequent meeting, but in the context of July, yes.
Okay, everyone, thank you. This is good food for thought. And since we're at time, we'll follow up by email about the next meeting and let you know what the agenda will be if there is a meeting. And thank you for the feedback regarding the recommendation process right now.
Yeah, wonderful. And thank you everybody for your hard work. And if you are a voting council member, please cast your votes. And maybe we'll see you July, possibly. We will let you know, but keep it on your calendar for now. And thank you, Annika and Summer, for all that you do for us. So thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.